Are you ready to stop stress, anxiety, and low self-esteem from running your life? Join award-winning author Dr. Friedemann from Empowerment Radio as he addresses some of the most prevailing challenges in our day-to-day lives. Find out how you can use the power of your mind to overcome self-sabotaging patterns and build a solid foundation of confidence and self-respect. Learn cutting-edge tools and approach every day with great ease, joy, and purpose. This is the time to empower yourself. Now, here's your host, Dr. Friedemann.
Welcome to Empowerment Radio. I am your host, Dr. Friedemann, and today we're going to talk about a topic that's very dear to my heart, which is fear and anxiety. How can we make peace with fear and anxiety? Now, I have been personally dealing with fear and anxiety for a long time. I started to be afraid when I was a child, and it was mainly about the idea that I'm somehow not very smart, which the teachers at that time and also my parents put a little bit into my mind, and the idea that I had to really be good in school in order to please my folks at home. And so with my anxiety, I came to my parents and explained to them that, I cannot sleep, and they gave me some light drugs and didn't really help. The best sleeping medication was actually a big fat cat that I put into my bed, and somehow that calmed me down. But the issues underneath all of that just remained for a long, long time. Now, I understood that fear and anxiety was something that can really make our mind and our whole life experience quite unpleasant. It can make us feel very powerless. It can make us feel also that we have to do certain things to cope with it. Now, for me as a 10-year-old, I developed obsessive behavior. I thought, well, it's a good idea if I'm going to make sure that all the carpets are straight, maybe because when they're straight, nothing bad's going to happen to my parents or nothing's going to happen to the world. And so that was my coping mechanism. And of course, this is one of those really deeply seated signs of feeling overwhelmed and powerless that make us hold on to this kind of behavior. Now, eventually, I learned to overcome the anxiety. And I learned that there were root causes inside that made me feel anxious. And I also understood more and more how many other people are anxious. And when you're anxious yourself, you feel like you're alone. You're feeling like everyone else is normal. Everyone else can easily deal with the world. Just I am somehow weak and flawed. And that's exactly what I thought. But then when I was in cardiology, I saw that so many of my patients had been dealing with stress and anxiety before they had physical problems, that it was actually omnipresent in that patient group that I was dealing with, and it was a root cause. It was a root cause for these physical challenges they came to the hospital with, but I also saw that there was no time, there were no means, and there was also not a lot of education on what we as doctors could do besides prescribing some medication to make these people feel better. So at some point I decided, since I know the problem and since I am really for preventative medicine rather than medicine that is about treating the symptoms, to focus on overcoming fear and anxiety and helping people this way to lead healthier and also more well-balanced lives. Now, 70% of doctor visits these days are related to stress, anxiety, and depression. And most doctors, just like we did in the past, are basically bound to say, well, I'm just going to either send you off to a therapist or I'm going to prescribe you medication. Now, there are studies that say that more people in the last 15 years say, no, I don't want to go to a therapist. I want to just have it fixed than ever before. And so that fix with taking anti-anxiety medication and taking antidepressants is something that became more and more popular, so that now every year billions of dollars are spent to somehow deal with that anxiety epidemic that really is what we are facing right now. Now, it is an omnipresent problem because just our external world seems so chaotic at times and so unsafe. You turn on the radio, and right away you hear about terrorists and Zika viruses and reality TV stars that run for president and the economy crashing and all of those things that create that sense of uncertainty inside of us. So our mind reacts, our mind becomes more worried and becomes more anxious. Now, the problem with anxiety is that at the time when we need to be the most calm and centered and collected, we appear the most out of sorts. It's like, you're just in a race and you're going down with your car a mountain road, and all of a sudden you realize, oh my God, the steering wheel is not working and the brakes are also off. And so that's somehow that same feeling when you are dealing with a stressful situation and your emotions are flooding you. And in that moment, you just feel like I cannot see straight, I don't know what to say, and all I want is just hide out and avoid the situation. That sense of overwhelm and powerless can come up at the most inopportune moments. And so it's no wonder that we do want to get rid of these emotions as soon as possible. And we want to ideally not have to feel them ever again. Now, the problem with treating fear and anxiety as a biochemical problem, something that is just misfiring or an imbalance of neuropeptides in your brain, is that by doing that, we may overlook that there are other layers to fear and anxiety that just don't get addressed. The other problem is that anti-anxiety medication has certainly some drawbacks. For example, the side effects that a lot of people feel like, well, it's diminishing my enjoyment in life. One of the side effects is that sense of numbness, that feeling of, well, I don't feel negative emotions, but I also don't feel positive emotions. I feel like my whole being is wrapped in cotton. Other people say that even though they don't feel the intensity of the emotions, they also still are dealing with the same issues like before. There's still insecurity. There's still a mind that goes into the negative and sometimes also fictional horror story directions. There's still that sense of maybe not being good enough or not being able to measure up, or there's still the avoidance or the pleasing pattern that originally came from the fear and anxiety. So even though the feelings are not there, they really haven't changed. And therefore, there is something that they always say is missing. And then there is, of course, also the idea that is it really empowering when we are thinking that fear and anxiety are purely a biochemical problem? Originally, the thought was, well, if we are making fear and anxiety more something that we can treat with medication, then we don't necessarily guilt ourselves for having those emotions. But I read the other day in a nice article in the Wall Street Journal where someone was saying, well, when I was dealing with fear and anxiety and I was taking medication and I had that mindset, well, somehow my neuropeptides in my brain are just a little off. It didn't give me a sense that I could control the situation. In fact, it gave me more a sense of, well, I am actually powerless. There is nothing I can do, and the only thing I have to hold on to is this little pill. And that is a problem that also starts now with our children. 5 to 6% of children are now on antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication. And that's a really challenging number because basically we are saying having emotions is not okay. Basically, we are saying, well, you're not feeling good, so let's just suppress those feelings so that you can function better. But isn't it true that fear and anxiety when we grow up is also just very normal? It's just a part of that angst of a teenager, that growing pain of a young adult, that idea of not fitting in that somehow we can also learn with other ways to deal with, to become more familiar with, and eventually also to outgrow. So by suppressing these emotions, whether in our children or in ourselves, are we missing out on something? Are we missing out maybe on a way for us to become stronger, more whole, and ultimately also a better version of ourselves? When we come back, we're going to talk about another perspective on fear and anxiety that is more uplifting, that is more inspirational, and that is also more empowering. So stay tuned. We will be right back. Welcome back to Empowerment Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Friedemann, and today the topic is how to make peace with fear and anxiety. Before the break, we talked about that the more common way of looking at fear and anxiety is to see it as a medical disorder, something that has to do with misfirings in the brain, and that somehow the imbalance of chemicals in the brain are mainly the culprit on what creates those emotions. And as I talked about, there is also the problem with that, that it doesn't really give us a sense that we can do anything about it. It more gives us a sense that we are, just unlucky. Maybe the genes were a little bit off, or there's just something that our brain is doing without us really having any handle on it or being able to overcome it. Now, in all the 15 years I've been working with clients on fear and anxiety, I found that the opposite is true. And I found that there are very good and powerful ways for us to not only deal and manage with fear and anxiety, but truly to heal it and to overcome it. And the way to do this is to understand that there is another way to think about fear and anxiety, a way that is much more allowing us to, simply said, do something about it. Now, I have been a physician and I have been a researcher, and so for me, naturally, because I was very much in my head when I was not anxious, for me, it needs to make sense. For me, it needs to be understandable. There needs to be some kind of a logic. And so this is also how I was researching and trying to understand fear and anxiety. Now, what I found was so interesting is the topic of the non-logical, non-rational part of our mind, which is the deeper part of our mind, the subconscious mind. And just to understand that the subconscious mind has so much to do with how we feel and how we create under fear and anxiety was in itself very helpful, because it gave me the sense that there is really a great leverage that we have not really tapped into, that allows us to find out the reasons why we have fear and anxiety in the first place, and then how to overcome it. Now, one of the, or three of the key problems of fear and anxiety, to be exact, are that A, it feels really overwhelming when we are anxious. And as I said before, it can make us feel completely powerless. The second problem is that we don't know why we feel anxious. Often it just doesn't make any sense. Often it just comes out of the blue. We wake up with it, or we are on our second date. The first one went so well, so why are we sabotaging ourselves by just shaking the moment we are seeing this other person? And then we also don't know what to do. We are just clueless. We just feel like, oh, there it is again. And then we are pretty much stuck with the emotion. We cannot run away from it. We cannot ignore it. We get mad at it, which makes it only worse. So these are all things that make that dealing with emotions so challenging. In some ways, it's easier to deal with other sensations. When you're hungry, it's time to eat. You're tired, it's time to sleep. That's why fear and anxiety is maybe not so much as a sensation, but it's maybe something that goes beyond that. It may be better to see the analogy of fear and anxiety with pain. Now, We'll come back to this in a moment. The subconscious mind, that really fascinating, bigger part of our mind. It's a consciousness that's underneath that logical, rational part of our mind. And some people say it's about 80% of our consciousness, and only 20% are the conscious, rational mind. That subconscious mind is pretty much running our lives. It takes care of our memories. It takes care of the beliefs and values that we have inside. It is responsible for most of our body functions, and it does also regulate our automatic behavior. You know, how many times are we in the shower and thinking already about work or what we're going to do afterwards? And somehow we get out of the shower and notice, oh, the hair is wet. Who was actually washing my hair? Or we are eating while watching TV, but somehow the fork is finding the mouth, even though we're not really consciously aware of it. So there are so many things we do automatically that the subconscious keeps track of, that we need to realize that that part of our mind is a very important aspect of who we are. Now, the subconscious mind is also the source of our emotions. Now, since the subconscious mind communicates with us through not only body sensations or spontaneous thoughts that are coming up, but also through dreams, where we just have these wild things happening in the middle of the night, and often they are metaphorical and often they have some kind of meaning. It is pretty clear that the subconscious is in constant search to get some messages across for us to pay attention. And that is also what happens when we feel fear and anxiety. The subconscious mind wants you simply to get the message. It needs to have you pay attention to that, what it tries to get across. Now, the question, of course, is what does it try to get across? What is actually the subconscious trying to tell you when it brings up fear and anxiety? Now, the subconscious mind has two prime functions, prime directions. One is to make us happy, but probably the more important one, if happiness is not important, but the one that focuses more on initially is to make us survive, to protect us. And so whenever something feels a little bit out of sorts, whenever the subconscious perceives a situation as potentially dangerous, danger can be a rejection, danger can be a loss, danger can be a humiliation. Whenever things happen around us or are interpreted inside of us as potentially threatening, fear and anxiety kick in, ultimately to protect us. I think that makes pretty sense. Now, what does not make sense to most of us is why are we getting anxious even though everything is fine? Everything is okay. I have done whatever, maybe spoken at a meeting, or I have been going for my checkup at the hospital 50 times. Everything was fine. Never really something bad happened. I was flying in the plane all across the world. I always landed safely, and still, every time one of those situations arises, I am getting scared. Something inside of me is freaking out. Why does the subconscious do that? Why does the subconscious make us anxious when we are meeting new people, or anxious when we are feeling like the person that we are working for may have a bad mood and we are right away thinking, well, it must be us that we did something wrong? Why are we anxious when somehow we are trying to be in control and then something happens that wasn't really on our agenda and we are feeling like the whole world is falling apart? What are the reasons for that? And we will discuss more about that, because in some level, what it points towards is that there is a pain inside of you, that there is something unaddressed that makes a subconscious overinterpret certain situation, distort reality, ignore certain facts, and focus only onto the negative. In this regard, we have to see fear and anxiety as a message similar to pain. Let's say you have pain in your teeth, like you're just noticing, when I have some drinking something cold, I'm feeling some pain. Well, the way to deal with that pain is not just taking a painkiller and ignoring it. The way to deal with this pain is to go to your dentist and have it checked out. And underneath that pain that you have there, maybe the cavity the dentist finds. But then, what is the reason for the cavity? Maybe you're eating too much sweets. Maybe you're not really having a good dental hygiene. Maybe there is an additional problem that you're lacking vitamin D and you don't have enough calcium. There are layers of reasons why you had that pain, and the pain is only the symptom. And this is exactly the same with fear and anxiety. Fear and anxiety is the pain that is expressed by the subconscious mind, pointing towards root causes that need to be addressed. When we come back, we're going to talk about those layers, those root causes that are underneath most fears and anxiety, and how we can address them. And I will talk about an amazing opportunity that will come for you in September to learn how to work consciously with your subconscious mind to break through fear and anxiety and build a new and stronger foundation of confidence and self-esteem. Now, I just said before the break that there is a wonderful opportunity to help you to work on the root of fear and anxiety and to really address it and heal it for good, to break through fear and anxiety so that you don't just feel, I put a band-aid on it or I learned how to shove it aside. You can actually learn from fear and anxiety more about yourself than probably any other emotion, and by learning about yourself, you are outgrowing whatever was at the root of fear and anxiety and learning to become a more empowered and self-reliant person. And that is what I do every day with clients in individual sessions all over the world. I'm working with clients via Skype and the phone, no matter where they live. And I'm offering this also twice a year as a 8-week seminar. Once a week, there is a session, a video session, and a coaching session. And you will learn the steps and you will receive the tools and you will go through the processes to address the subconscious root causes of fear and anxiety and truly be free from that emotional challenge that may have kept you hostage and imprisoned for such a long time. The seminar will start on September 10th. There is a very special offer right now going on. If you sign up before September 1st, you're saving quite a bit. You can find out more on the website, thefearandanxietysolution.com. It's thefearandanxietysolution.com. And later on, we will have a guest on the show who was at the latest seminar, and she will talk about more her experiences and how much she has gained and how much she has really grown and learned from what the information and the processes in the seminar gave her. So we talked about that anxiety in some ways is a symptom, the pain, just like fear, the pain that is expressed from the subconscious mind to the conscious mind, that there is some deeper root cause that has to be addressed. Now, what are those root causes? Now, as I said before, I like to be systematic. I like to investigate what are those very common layers that create fear and anxiety. What are the wounds that most people that are anxious and fearful and worried and insecure are really dealing with? And so I found there are three main root causes that if we are addressing them, we truly are healing ourselves. We're healing our past. We are healing the fragmented self. We are healing limiting thoughts and ideas of who we are. And by doing so, we are healing the wounds so that the pain doesn't exist anymore. We're healing the wounds of fear and anxiety so that the subconscious mind doesn't have to show us, well, there is still something out of balance. There is still a confusion in the past. there's still a hurt that hasn't been addressed. And those three root causes are the emotional traumas and baggage of the past. So many of my clients told me that they were never allowed to be emotional. And when they were emotional, when they were feeling anxious, or when they were feeling in need of some support, they were either ignored or made fun of or just shown that this is a weakness, you should be more tough or you should be more rational. So they suppressed those emotions. They may not have necessarily gone through the most traumatic experiences, but internally it was a turmoil. Internally, it made them feel somehow unsafe, or it made them feel abandoned, or it made them feel confused about what they were feeling. And all of those memories and all of those emotional attachments are still stored in the subconscious mind. And of course, when we store a lot of these emotions, at some point it's like a pressure cooker ready to explode. And that pressure cooker makes basically any other situation that can bring up anxiety way bigger than what that given situation really warrants to be. Now, the other root cause is that fragmentation I just mentioned, where there is a part of us that still tries to hide out or please or somehow overachieve because it feels unsafe in the world, it feels not belonging, it feels not good enough. And then there is another part that feels more mature or adult or positive and optimistic. And often, if you have been dealing with anxiety, you can see that these two sides of you are clashing, that you feel, oh, I have a great idea, I'm really positive and excited. And next day you feel anxious, insecure, and you hear this voice inside of you that says, who do you think you are? That will never work. You're just going to embarrass yourself. And it goes back and forth and back and forth. And you really don't feel whole. You don't feel at peace with yourself. So that's the second root cause that needs to be addressed. And the third one is that deep core limiting identity that so many of us have been imprinted on and programmed with from the past. And that can be something like you are not good enough, you are not like the others, you are not fitting in, you don't belong, or the world is not safe, people cannot be trusted. Things that just are still shaping how we look at the world and ourselves, because these are like filters through which we are looking at the reality we are in. And in some ways, you could see these filters that are distorting reality are filters that are given to us from our childhood, and we are still looking through the eyes of a child at our adult world. And that is also a root cause that we can address. Those filters, those limiting beliefs and identities can be replaced, and you can truly see yourself in an empowered, updated version. And for this, I want to just read to you something that I recently received from a client of mine, David, because he describes perfectly what his journey was and what happened with him. He says, nothing made sense about how I felt about life. I had a happy family, great friends, my full health, and a soaring career, which afforded me a wonderful lifestyle. The more success I had, though, the worse I felt inside. Although I usually kept myself busy enough during the day at work to escape my feelings, my downtime was filled with feelings of anxiety and depression. I was worried about everything and constantly imagined doomsday scenarios about my future, none of which were reasonable or consistent with past experiences. All my time with my family was spent in a fearful darkness. I could no longer feel any pleasure. I then went through 5 years of antidepressants, which lifted most of the symptoms. However, the side effects were awful and made me feel disconnected from my emotional life. I decided that it was not good, that this was not a good life, and that there must be a better way. When I started to work with Dr. Friedemann on the subconscious root causes of my anxiety, I learned to understand that different periods of my childhood had instilled deep and buried feelings of worthlessness, and that I later developed compensating heroic beliefs. Both of these opposing beliefs remained in conflict with each other and with my present self, and I manifested themselves as two unconscious personalities, a protector personality and a hero personality, both hiding in plain sight. So this is exactly what we just talked about, these inner conflicts where there is one side that wants to hide out and another side that wants to save the world, to be special, to feel valued. And of course, it caused him a confusion, a feeling of imbalance, and also a lot of anxiety. Dr. Friedman's approach helped me to uncover, reconcile, and value these parts of my psyche while at the same time building a new set of mature beliefs founded in reality and self-compassion. I have now been over a year free of drugs and irrational anxiety and enjoy life now and have a wholesome sense of self-belief that I didn't realize was missing in the first place. I no longer seek external validation, and I no longer have the constant sense that my world is going to come crumbling down. I spend my time doing the things I enjoy, and I have a renewed vigor and lust for life and all it has to offer. And this is just an example of what happens when you're not suppressing anxiety, when you're not battling anxiety, but when you're looking at anxiety as a catalyst for growth, as that just inner navigator that says, okay, let's heal this, bring yourself into a wholeness, heal and clean up the past, change how you are seeing yourself and how you're approaching life, and then from that bigger and more outgrown and more empowered self, the one that has outgrown those challenges of the past, you can create a life that is way more fulfilling and way more enjoyable. And this is how we can make peace with fear and anxiety, by honoring it, that it's not something that's just annoying or holding us back or a disorder or a weakness, that it is actually here for a reason. And the reason is that our subconscious mind, as I said before, wants us to be safe, but also wants us to be happy and fulfilled. When we come back, we will talk more about the Fear and Anxiety Solution Seminar that I'm offering, the 8-week seminar that starts on September 10th. It's really something I'm excited about. And we'll talk with Maggie, which is a participant of the latest seminar, and she will tell us more about her experiences and her wonderful successes. Maggie, welcome to the show.
Hi, Dr. Friedemann. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for calling in, and you have been just almost completing. You haven't completed the last assignment, but you have been almost completing the Fear and Anxiety Solution Seminar. And I wanted to ask you, how did it go?
Well, it went very well. I really enjoyed it. I did put in a lot of effort. I actually watched each video twice.
Very good.
I think that helped me because there's so much information in each one. But all in all, it went really well, and I feel much better.
What were your struggles with fear and anxiety when you started with the seminar?
Well, I was an avoider. I isolated myself to the point where I rarely went out.
Mm-hmm.
I started developing more intense OCD behaviors, like keeping everything straight and flicking all the light switches the right way. I'm one that has physical manifestations and mine have been digestive issues and muscular tension. So those were kind of increasing in intensity. I also found that I was getting more easily overwhelmed. Like if I was in the kitchen and I splashed something on myself, I would think it was the end of the world when, it was just a little splash.
Right.
And I think the biggest thing that was most difficult to deal with was my inner voice was getting more frequent, more vicious, more intense.
What did the inner voice say?
Just lots of negative things. You can't do that. You're fat. Don't do that. Don't, just don't do that. There's no need to do that. Just stay here. Trying to protect me, but holding me back.
Right. So like an inner critic.
And yes, that inner critic.
But also certainly not a very gentle or kind voice inside. So that brought up more anxiety from the inside than from the outside?
Most definitely. mostly from the inside
Hmm. And
of me.
since when did you have anxiety? Is that a long time?
Well, I think it's been building over the years, and about I've been on sort of a process for about 15 years since my father passed away of more self-growth and actualization. And but about 5 years ago I had a huge change in my beliefs, and since then my anxiety has increased. And then about
Mm.
2 years ago my dog of 15 years died, and
Mhm.
that just seemed to the grief and that loss just added to it.
Yeah.
And it just seemed to be the past 5 years getting more intense.
Hmm. So when you jumped into the fear and anxiety solution, I can imagine that brought up some anxiety as well, because
Yes.
you were not sure, can I do it? Will I succeed? I remember you sent an email about those kind of questions you had. So what did you notice as you went along these sessions?
Well, I noticed that once I realized I had an inner core belief that was very negative, that was, I am not worthy. I grew up that I was a worthless sinner and I'm not worthy. And
Hmm.
once I was able to learn through the class to change that I am worthy and valuable, that's when I really started changing and really feeling better.
Mm.
In my life, others would see it as like I would go out and someone would compliment my clothes, which rarely happens. Or I would get a call back on a job interview, which I'm going out and getting a new job.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. This is kind of another one I was thinking about earlier this week. I actually had some dental work done. I didn't feel worthy to spend the money to take
Hmm.
out the mercury and put in a new different filling for
Hmm.
protection. And I actually went ahead and I did it.
Excellent. And you celebrated it. Not that this
Yeah,
is very common that people celebrate their worthiness by going to the dentist, but in your
yeah.
case, it's absolutely appropriate. Now, you also said that people ask you for advice, which was something that you didn't really, weren't really used to.
Right. I went up on a vacation. I headed north. I went to Petoskey and I was visiting a friend, and another friend came and we had dinner. And, we were going around the table talking about things, and the gals were actually sort of asking for my input and my advice. And I felt okay. I felt confident enough to speak up and to respond to them.
Great. Now, this inner voice, what happened with that?
Well, that inner voice, I learned through the sessions to counteract it. And so I would continually, the best of my ability, I would become aware when it was happening, and I would do the steps that you taught to counteract.
Hmm.
And now today, the voice is much, much less intense. And that is something that is a huge, like, hooray. I'm
Hmm.
so happy.
Was part of the reason why it's less intense also because you could see the face of the voice more clearly? Who actually is that voice? It's not a monster, it's not some mean old man that just points his finger at you. Who did you find out that voice really is?
Yeah, this voice is just my inner little Maggie that was just trying to survive, and she did the best she could, and she was actually trying to help me to keep me from being, rejected or um, feeling pain. And so, that was a huge insight for me, Friedman, when I realized that my adult beliefs are so different from what I was taught as a child.
Yeah.
And so I can actually go back and talk to that little girl, that inner protector, and I can just tell her what we know now. I can
Hmm.
comfort her with compassion. I can reassure her. And that has made a huge difference. That was an insight that was real big for me.
Mm. And so that voice feels understood, it feels listened to.
Yes. And for me, this is kind of interesting. I have a beanie baby. I have like a mama baby and then a little beanie baby. And it's in the bedroom. And now when I look at that, I think of that as a reminder for me every day to talk to my little inner
Hmm.
protector. every day you need to keep in contact with her, just like, just to soothe her and comfort her and let her know, I got you, I've got this.
Do you enjoy it?
I really enjoy it. I enjoy doing inner work. I enjoy growing and expanding. I did not like feeling so constricted.
Hmm.
And I was just really getting frustrated with that because I know that I have such ability. And
Right.
now I just feel more expanded again.
And so, do you have a sense that you understand yourself better in general?
Yes, much better. I have a better understanding of my unconscious and how it affects me and how it's a part of me. Um, I mean, one of the other big things was the four survival techniques
Hmm.
that we use. Well, I realize that I use a little bit of all of them. Of course, some of them, avoider and probably a pleaser, definitely pleaser.
Hmm.
And those were survival modes. And now I am switching to the thriving mode where I'm not using those old worn out techniques to live. I'm working from an empowered place versus those old scary places.
And that feels safe?
It just gives me confidence. It helps me to feel safe.
Hmm.
Definitely more courageous.
Isn't it interesting that now avoidance is not really the go-to setting for you? It's now really about no longer survival, but thriving and just having a deeper understanding about yourself and the subconscious that ultimately just wanted to protect you, certainly helped you to also give you that what maybe, and I don't know about you, but maybe you never heard these messages that you're giving yourself. Maybe there wasn't really that kind of acceptance and kindness that you're now providing to that inner self. And so you're healing a wound that has been there for a long time.
Right. And I agree. I think for the past year, I became aware of having self-compassion.
Hmm.
So I've been sort of working on that a little bit, like with little mini meditations. But this course just like was the cherry on the ice cream. It just helped it all to come together, and it gave me tools to actually move forward and to actually feel confident and compassionate for myself. It was really big.
And we are all clear that fear and anxiety are normal companions of our life. Now, if fear and anxiety nudges at you and tries to get your attention, what do you do now? Do you feel still so overwhelmed, or do you feel like now I have the insights and tools to respond to it?
Well, exactly right. I catch it more quickly before it escalates,
Hmm.
so I can feel it and see it and sense it more quickly. And now I definitely have the tools to deal with it. I mean, that was like especially the very last seminar, number 6.
Hmm.
You really outlined what causes them, and if I'm feeling that way, to look and see, well, what triggered me? Did I give my power away again?
Right.
Why did I leave my center? And then you get direct tools to help myself get back.
And you use those tools.
I really do.
So, what advice would you give anyone who also embarks on this journey to make the best out of it like you did?
Well, I would give the advice to say that you are so worthy and you are so valuable. And you may not realize it because you may be so busy in life, but just take the time to stop and listen and try these techniques, even though they may seem different.
Hmm.
Change is difficult, but it's so worth it in the end.
And they can do it if you
Oh,
can do
definitely.
it.
That's for sure. Yes.
Do you believe that 2 months ago you would have thought that you could be where you are now?
No, I would have been hoping I could somehow feel better, but I was in such a bottom of a pit sort of a thing, you know, kind of like I didn't realize that I was hoping. I say I had hope, and I found you, and I found these seminars, and you responded to me when I contacted you, and I had a sense in my heart that this was the right track. And
Hmm.
I'm pretty discerning, and I don't like do a lot of stuff. I just sort of try to take care of things myself. but I knew that I was on the right track with you in this program. It just felt right to me. So I went for it.
Well, you listen to your intuition, which is a part of your subconscious mind. And as
Yeah.
much as your subconscious wanted to protect you, it also wanted you to heal and grow and
Right.
soar and thrive again. So it's very, very nice that you are at the place that you are right now. And thank you so much for sharing because I know a lot of people can relate to your story, and you are giving a lot of people hope that there is a way to heal and a way to befriend and make peace with fear and anxiety. So thank you very much. Well, another hour of Empowerment Radio went by so quickly, it felt like just 10 minutes to me. I hope that what we talked about inspired you, encouraged you, and helped you to see fear and anxiety less as a flaw or a disorder, but more as a call from your subconscious mind that now is a good time to heal the wounds of the past, to let go of the limiting beliefs that held you back, and to step out of survival mode into thriving. If you're ready to heal and grow, go to thefearandanxietysolution.com and find out more about my individual sessions and also the upcoming seminar and how they can help you to get yourself to that next level of confidence, self-empowerment, and happiness. I certainly would enjoy supporting you to reach your goals and go far beyond them. Until the next Empowerment Radio Show, be well and be good to yourself. Goodbye.